Hello, YouTube. Dozer here bringing you a new video talking about Prism today with a very well-known Prism player on the internet, on the Purple Cord Discord out there. We have the FronsA joining us today. Going to talk about what we like about Prism, where Prism's at in the current metagame, the upcoming Pro Tour, I think, and about what we hope coming in new sets like the High Seas just around the corner. So we hope you enjoy the video. Franz, thank you for joining and coming on the channel. Good to have you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So right off the bat, this is not our first meeting. We were able to meet at the Calling Memphis in person after trading DMs sometimes, but a lot of public Prism parlance, as we might even say. So talk me through a bit about now so we can get to know each other a bit better and get the audience to know you a bit better as well. When did you start playing Fab? Like, what set did you come in with?
Sure. I came in partway between Uprising and Dynasty. It wasn't for lack of trying. Uh, Friends of mine have been trying to get me to get into Flesh and Blood because I've been a longtime Magic player. I mean, Beta was the set of Magic that I got into, and I played it for well over, 25 years, almost 30 at that point. Um, and then I had gotten actually interested and actually gave the game a shot literally a week before the Pulse of Eisenloft ban in Classic Constructed, when they kind of attempted to neuter Oldham a little bit. Um, but at that time, I was learning Oldhim, I was learning Icelander. Obviously, the ice talent was something that really drew me to the game because for anybody that is familiar with Magic's Gathering, especially the Legacy format, the Blue White Miracles deck was kind of one that I gravitated to a lot. The mid range control strategies, as well as specifically in modern Mono Green Tron, where it is kind of just like, hi, I'm going to throw this out here, you deal with it. So both those kind of strategies I gravitated towards with Flesh and Blood, and that's kind of with Oldhim and Icelander kind of resonated very well with me. And plus,
That's
the
awesome.
color schemes were amazing.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it's Ice has definitely been one of my favorite ways to play the game as well over time. I really enjoyed Icelander, Ice Lexi, not so much Oldhim or Starvo. The Guardian game plan to me was very dirtily, and I didn't really enjoy sitting back the whole game. I liked to try to snowball my advantage, and of course, with Prism in the game at the time, at least for a long time, that was obviously my go-to. And then even when she did leave, it was more things like the Dromais or the Icelanders or the Lexis, just
Hmm.
a bit more fiddly. It's not so much like, Winter's Whale, or like
Yeah.
Tiny's Fist as it became, right? So I like to do a lot of sequencing stuff myself. So that's really cool. For context, I started with Monarch Unlimited. So I came in right around the time that it came out back in, I guess it was 2021, around the spring or the summertime around there. And so obviously, Tales of Aria and Ice Heroes and stuff didn't exist yet. The only talents that existed at the time were Light and Shadow. And of course, that's where I learned about Prism and got hooked on the game from there. So it's glad to see. Well, I'm just glad to see, and it's good to see so many people have come into the game since then. Whether that's during Tales of Aria, whether that's during Everfest, whether that's during Uprising or Dynasty Outsiders, whatever the case may be. So it's great to have you as a old fuddy duddy boomer Fab player to a more new face. It's great to have you, and we hope to have anybody out there in the audience who's thinking of getting into Fab or new to Fab just really reach out and try and get involved, because the community is so great and the community is so welcoming and happy to talk about things. So definitely don't be
Yep.
shy.
Absolutely
Speaking
agree with
of
that.
speaking of Fab, right? So you got into the game after being a long-time card game player with Magic,
Mhm.
and you have been very vocal in the public channels about strategy and about going to the Pro Tour and going to RTNs and going to callings. So how do you interact with Fab on that basis? Are you a competitive player? Are you a true competitor? Like, you are a Spike? Are you a Johnny? Like, what? How do you just view yourself interacting with the game?
I would definitely say I'm a pretty competitive player, but I also enjoy like casual, having fun. Fringe formats have always been a thing to me. In fact, it's a kind of a common joke on my. I'm part of Team Eclipse, and it's very well known that I'm pretty much the only player on the team who enjoys the Blitz format, and I love it like no other. I look at different formats other than main formats like new challenges, and that's just kind of like a puzzle for me to solve. And so I kind of like to be a jack of all trades, so to speak, when it comes to formats and attacking different angles and things like that. I really have been very fortunate and blessed to, at this point in my life, I actually do have the opportunities to travel, whereas when I was younger I didn't necessarily have the chance to do that. And I've been fortunate enough to have a little bit of success on the circuits and be able to go to these callings and fortunately qualify for like nationals and the pro tour and things like that.
That's awesome. I think it's important for not only us to contextualize that, but also for the audience because Flesh and Blood is a really cutthroat game. It can be really brutal in that moment to moment gameplay because it's numbers, it's razor thin margins. And while it is a game that you can play at any skill level and have fun, it's definitely a game that is very hard to win against someone who really knows what they're doing. So getting into it
Yeah.
as a new player, you really have to decide how are you going to interact with the game? How are you going to set those expectations for yourself? Like for me personally, I just thought it was fun. I never once thought about, I never knew anything about Magic Pro Tours or Grand Prix or anything like that. I never did any Magic growing up. And I barely have any experience with it now, even. And so the competitive circuit to me has always been somewhat of an enigma, right? It's always been something that's been a bit foreign.
Was that an illusionist joke?
It sure was. On this channel, it always is. But the fun thing about going into Fab with that mentality was when I did go to the first calling and I did go X1 day one, and I did go into day two, and I got into the top 16 or top 32 or whatever it was, my very first competitive event ever. It was, I didn't even know how big of a deal that was. I thought, oh yeah, I'm playing Prism, I'm winning, that's normal. And then I get to these top rounds and various things happen and had some good games and I just played for fun, played to play against good opponents and have some good
Mm.
games. I didn't really worry about the winning or putting pressure on myself to perform at a certain level or to hit a certain ranking. It was, I just want to play Prism. I want to play Prism against good players and I want to play Prism well. And when you do those things, then you can win sometimes and lose sometimes. So I think it's a good mentality to be like aware of, like, what are your goals with the game? So
Yeah, yeah, 100%. And you also bring up a really good point is that dedication to the game because it can be quite cutthroat, especially at the higher level events. The whole randomness of your opponent's pairing and the constantly evolving meta. This game really pays off when you focus on specific heroes, ones that you become intimately familiar with, and instead of just being like, oh, well, I don't have a heck of a lot of experience with XYZ best deck at the time, but I'm going to play it anyways because this is probably going to be the right thing to do. Now, what you see consistently with a lot of the recurring names that are hitting the top eights of these events and even winning these events is that they spend so much focused time dedicated to learning the playstyles, learning the matchups, learning the lines even before they present themselves. What situations are you uh, trying to set up? Can you pivot at a moment's notice should your opponent start to gain an advantage on card advantage or anything like that? It's a game theory is a really really heavy part of this game.
it really is. And one thing that I think is starting to become known about the game is how much that experience does lend to success in the game. You see the
Mm.
same names crop up all the time, in part because some people are very fortunate enough to go to basically every event. That is definitely a real thing. Not all of us, like you said, have the freedom or the time or the possibly even the funds to go to every event
Mm.
all around the world, whether it's flying from a calling in one country to across the entire ocean to calling in another country on the next day. That's not something everyone is lucky enough to enjoy. So while we want to recognize the accomplishments of very good players who've put in the effort and made Flesh and Blood a priority in their lives and succeeded at doing so, we applaud them. also remember that I think a lot of Flesh and Blood players understand that that's not for everyone. That's not a standard. That's not a
Yeah,
true
you
metric.
shouldn't measure your own success based on others who, have the freedom, have the ability, the success, coming up from, somebody who, uh, you know, you had to learn somewhere. With coming from Magic, I was one of the grinders on the circuit and everything like that, and I really enjoyed, a significant amount of, success and dedication. When I started learning this game, I really had to kind of like tone it back, tone down my expectations and realize I wasn't going to join this game and suddenly be like, oh my gosh, this is such an easy game to pick up. Oh my gosh, I'm just crushing these events or anything like. I got my butt kicked right off the bat. In fact, I my very first game was quite literally a Blitz Oldhim versus Blitz Fi, and I was just like going cross-eyed like, wait a minute. You start with that here and you can pick it up for free and then you do this and you jab me, but I'm trying to block and now you have more cards than I do. What is going on here? And so it's just, an evolving learning experience. Understanding it is had been so much fun along the way.
Yeah, and I think we all on this channel especially appreciate Prism because Prism has this effect, I think, on players where you get into the game and you might play your Oldhim, you might play your Fi, you might play your insert aggro deck of the year, of the month, even here, where it's just go again, go again, go again, attack. And then you look at Prism and you're like, what is this deck even trying to do? It half of it doesn't block, it loses to the number 6. Everything is basically the exact same card. How does this ever win anything? And then you start to learn about the mechanics of the game, the rules, the deep niche interactions where you can be like, oh, my Halo is basically the most powerful thing in my deck because aside from some variants sometimes where you draw the wrong card off of the Halo, you can,
Figment.
yeah, exactly. You can snipe your opponent's plays before they even happen and flip games on their head completely. You have things like the Arclight Sentinel, which can completely shut people out of the game if the right circumstances arise. So when Prism players start gathering these tools, it's kind of like people compare Flesh and Blood to a fighting game. And I think
Mm,
in this way, Prism is one of those characters that has this incredibly high skill ceiling. There's so many
yeah.
little interactions, little card choices that can snowball onto each other, where each game is like completely different than the last. You never have to worry about getting bored playing Prism, especially because sometimes the deck will fight you just like your opponent is.
Yep.
So it's important to be humble with coming into Flesh and Blood
Yeah.
and to recognize that there's room for everybody to learn all the time. And I do think that the best players are constant students of the game. They don't think that they've solved it. They're constantly looking for that new edge, that new optimization, and putting in the reps because at the end of the day,
Yeah.
experience counts for a lot. And I think you know a lot about that, don't you?
Oh yeah.
How many
Yeah,
matches
just
on Prism do you think you've played?
oh my goodness. Let's see. My Blitz deck alone, the logged ones that are just on Talishar is 2100. My iteration of CC Prism has, I think, 1400 at this point, and that's not even taking into account the live games that I've played and the tournaments and everything like that. Um, and this is even before I actually learned to officially begin tracking games. So it's definitely up there. Mark Morrison, one of my good friends and teammates, constantly jokes. He's like, "You probably have more reps on your CC Prism deck than I have games of Flesh and Blood in my entire career."
And that is what I wanted to draw attention to because there is that level of not only enjoyment of the game, it's awesome that you can enjoy playing Prism so much that you have put that many games in, but also being able to make those, hopefully, enough of those reps, fruitful reps, where you're actually able to gain some knowledge and remember something from them and not just jam games and get into that muscle
Yeah,
memory. But that's what we're trying to get on the channel. When we're trying to improve, we have to put in the reps. And the FronsA over here is one of the highest rep prisms I have ever seen. I don't know if I'm up there as well. I mean, I definitely have played my fair share of Prism over the years, but especially just new Prism alone, I think I have to take my hat off or my halo off to you because you definitely got the reps in the bag there. So great to see.
yeah, yeah.
So
It's
speaking
been
of,
fun. Like, oh, I was just gonna say, it's been fun because like, uh, early on when I went into Flesh and Blood, going through the gauntlet of all the ice heroes, they quite literally fell down. Like, every single one of them LL'd almost right in a row. And then I really kind of dirtled around trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I was like, oh, I started on Oldhim. Maybe I'll enjoy Bravo. I hated Bravo. It just was not enjoyable to me. Like, yes, you were doing pretty much the same game plan every time, and you're doing very powerful things, but it wasn't like I had much say in how I wanted to present the game. But then I slowly discovered Dromai and the illusionist aspect, and then having a board presence, which is something that with Magic the Gathering, I was like, okay, wait a minute, this is kind of what I'm used to. And so that gave me my real first exposure to the illusionist, and then New Prism came out. And I was like, okay, all right, I see what we're doing here. And we kind of like, a group of us just kind of like messed around with the Luminaris that everybody tries to forget ever existed until they gave us Angel's Glow. And Angel's Glow just completely opened the floodgates on the potential of this hero. I mean, everybody who has played pre-book banning Prism understood how ridiculous your board state could get just with Tome of Divinity. And that kind of power, that draw power, that card advantage is what I was used to in my, game experiences, playing competitive card games. And that's kind of what really locked me in on this hero as to how much is like, okay, you're going to sit there with, what, 4 cards, possibly 5 if you have an arsenal. Okay, well, I have a library and I'm about to pop off with a double tome turn, which I'm going to end with an ALS. So I'm going to kind of vomit all these auras into play, flip a couple angels, land a Genesis, and then end my turn with an ALS, which basically just time walks you. I'm going to draw, have an arsenal, have a 5-card hand, go, I'll wait for you to pass.
Yeah, it's funny too because the next question was going to be about what drew you to Prism, and so we already got that, which is fantastic because Prism just has everything. She has
Yeah.
all the good things of Fab and a lot of the bad things of Fab too, which is awesome because you get to see the highest highs and enjoy those lowest lows, which makes the highest highs feels that much sweeter when you do drop the Soraya with the ALS with maybe even the Avalon to just hard loop them with the library out. You got the
Yeah.
Genesis and the Bologna pumping up the counters, and your opponent just goes, am I allowed to concede? Is that still in the rules? Is that allowed? I even at the Battle Hardened the other day, I played a Arclight Sentinel against someone, and they're like, "Yep, there's the LS." I'm like, "Oh, it's okay. You can just pass. Like, you don't even have to attack it." And they're like, "Yeah, okay, okay." So there's definitely a
It's the
lot.
Jedi
Even
mind trick. You're just hoping
it
that they fall
is.
for it.
I mean, I say all the time when I'm playing other heroes, if someone does something, I'm like thinking Arclight Sentinel, they're like, "Get out of here," just because you can just blow people out with that card so much.
Yes.
It's kind of incredible. So, but yeah, Prism can do everything. She can make board state. She can send big attacks. She's got decent amounts of go again still, and you have a lot of these wonderful hands that blend very well and are very modal. And then sometimes you draw 3 figments, and you
Yep.
draw just a
You
angelic
just try and
relic,
make
and
the
you look
best
at your
of it.
hand, and you go, okay, this is not good, but we will survive. We have to take the good with the bad. Sometimes you try to go for your crazy Halo, get Figment of Ravages, ping your face, stop their attack, end their turn, and then you draw the Figment of Ravages, and you go, okay, not doing that. After all, okay, proceed. I die. Okay, good game. So
That's when you just cast it.
Well, yeah, hopefully you've got enough cards to cast that bad boy because 4 resources in Prism, that's steep. I think Prism is really appealing for so many of those reasons. It's like you have those highest highs. It kind of plays in that we're all card game players here. We like to gamble a bit. We're not playing chess, and Prism really leans into that
Yeah.
chaotic but powerful chaos of just if you can thread that needle and find those bad hands, ways to make them playable, then you can really just see a lot of great success, as you've been seeing,
Yeah.
because you did pretty well at the calling in Memphis, if I recall. Do you want to talk about that experience a bit?
Yeah, I went X and one on day one. My day one loss was to a Vincent, or no, a Viserai. I'm sorry, Viserai. And then day two, I'm all pumped, and I ran into I think it was three Viserai. Um, and then my day ended with against Eugene, who was the Rhinar. I decided to play one last round. I'm like, maybe I can save some elo. I sit down, nicest guy I've ever met. Shake his hand. I was like, I'm on Prism. He's like, oh, I'm on Reinar. I'm like, Jim, why? Why, Jim?
It's funny too because I remember in Monarch meta, Rhinar was an atrocious matchup then. We had no passing Mirage. You had Halo of Triumph, I mean Herald of Triumph, but it didn't really do anything. We didn't have Figments back
Yeah.
then. There were no Angels. It's just Spectral Shields, Spectras, and your Heralds. Rhinar's got scab skin leathers, claws, Intimidate completely wrecks your life. We go into
Yep.
Everfest. We get past the Mirage. Okay, the game's winnable. You can play enough auras where he can't kill them all, and you can win sometimes. And then now we're back into the realm of oh no, it's Rhinar. Nothing I do works into him. So how
Yep.
the
Yep.
turntables, yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
It was just an atrocious day two. It was, hey, but you know what? It's all right.
yeah, and I think that says a lot too because playing Prism at a high level and at a top level even is something that in this metagame not super easy to do, right? It's very hard to get consistent wins with Prism because you do have some of those matchups that are so horrendous, like Viserai was, Rhinar still is, and some other heroes can be as well. And when we're looking at the meta right now in the Hunted, going out of post Viserai LL, going into the high seas or high tides, whatever it is, what do you think about Prism's place in the meta right now? I know that she just did decently well to Battle Hardened. I think she got top eight in one slot, but she didn't
Yeah,
win. So walk us through kind of your view on where Prism sits in the meta right now.
sure. A couple weeks out from the Pro Tour, what we've been seeing is that those Viserai players have navigated into pretty much three kind of subsections. Some have just ran right into Vincent, and Vincent is incredibly powerful and very decently positioned in this current metagame. Does very well. Now, there's a reason why the Enigmas have kind of like lessened so to speak, in the metagame. You know, you don't see that massive Enigma presence anymore. The only Guardians that have been really showing up are the occasional Victors, and Victor is still a very solid Victor, but he's not in the iteration that we've always been used to. He's actually become quite aggressive in this metagame in order to keep up. Blocks very well, generates card advantage by creating golds with clashes, you know, replaces the cards that he spends on blocking, and then sends a large attack. Still a very, very solid choice in the metagame. I've also seen a lot of the Viserai players see the Aurora game plan and say, wow, we're not going to be as, you know, rune chant centric, but we're just going to send high value plays, very good, consistent, you know, breakpoints, and then we can block decently with like somersault and then come back, send 3-0 for 4 attacks, maybe with a little bit of arcane damage mixed in. So I kind of see, you know, those being the decks that are gravitated to from the standard Viserai players. And I mean, obviously, don't forget Syndra. Syndra is extremely powerful. Had an explosive weekend, the very first, you know, legal calling that she was there in Memphis. And then in the Battle Hardened, you know, Kevin Murphy showed up, was able to, you know, take control. And in fact, we were talking about, you know, those really awkward hands with the multiple figments and no blocks and stuff like that. If I remember correctly, he had a three, at least three no block opening hand on, I think it was turn zero, and he just immediately started filtering, and that's exactly the play that the Prism player needs to kind of navigate.
Yeah, and we do
um,
love seeing those Figment hands going first on turn one. That is definitely the best time
yeah,
to get those out there for sure.
yeah, but I definitely think Prism is a very, very strong candidate in this metagame. so many tools in the toolbox. I think that it's definitely not a deck that you can just pick up and expect results with. You have to put in the reps, know the lines, understand the windows, the layer steps where you have to respond. You had mentioned the Ravages play. Somebody's attacking an angel, you have to do it before the attack could potentially even get go again. Otherwise, it maintains the go again after you remove the angel target from combat.
Yeah, there's a lot of tricks and tips that I'm actually working on in a video myself. I'm trying to categorize and catalog every little niche interaction, no matter how small it is, to try and help new players get into the game. Because if you're a new player in Flesh and Blood, I can't tell you how many new people have tried to teach Flesh and Blood, and just the concept of the arsenal itself is so hard to get over that initial hump because they're thinking, okay, so it's a card, it's not in my hand, I can play it, but I can't pitch it. I can block with it, but only as a D react. You can't block with it normally. You activate it. Like, it's this whole thing where it's hard to get people to understand, like, oh yeah, you drop at the end of your turn, but not if you're going, but you do, like, if you're going first, you drop at the end, like all these things. And so if you're a new player, it's a lot of information. It can be very overwhelming, especially with Prism, with how many intricate, deep mechanics. Like, you have to know all the steps of every single phase of the game. Now that LSS keeps changing things too, it doesn't get any easier. Where now that they've
Yeah.
combined, I think there's the link step and the resolution step. Now it's just resolution and there's damage. So a lot of things that we can write down and try and help the new players along with as well. So
Yeah, of
we might
course.
even see the Franz show up to explain one of those, depending on how things go, right? So
Be more
that'd
than
be
happy
great.
to.
That'd be wonderful.
Yeah, the
So
the thing I will always remember is the my very first skirmish that I went to with the new Prism. I was constantly kind of chided, like, you're playing the worst Prism. You're playing the worst Prism. Starts at 16 life in a Blitz format. You're going to get blown out on turn zero and things like that. And I remember I was playing against, I believe it was a Dromai opponent. And my opponent was not really understanding the interactions of, like, okay, my Herald hits, it now goes to my soul. That triggers my hero ability. Now all of a sudden, because this happened, my Empyrean Rapture makes my flip free, and now I flip free, and they're just kind of like, wait a minute, what is exactly going on? And I was trying to do my best. I'm like, if I know I'm doing so much right now, I know I'm kind of just like throwing things around. Please stop me for whatever reason. I will explain what's happening. By all means, question me. And they're like, are you allowed to do all this? I'm like, I think and I hope so.
I remember the first time I played against a Kano online. It was like a Discord webcam, just casual game, and the guy played so many cards, and I thought, okay, he's cheating. He's just cheating. Like, I was brand new at the game. I had no idea what Kano did. I thought his ability was probably once per turn because it makes no sense to be able to do that infinite number of times per turn. This was back when Kano could just draw cards off Tome of Aetherwind, by the way, and Tome of Fyendal. So I was thinking, yeah, no, this is just cheating. I imagine Prism gives a lot of new players a very similar vibe of, yeah, I don't know what you're doing, but I don't like it, and I can't even follow it. So I think you're cheating, but proceed,
Yep.
blow me up, you know. Um, but I think that is a main reason that Prism has actually been so successful in this meta so far. I think a lot of people have not faced a lot of Prisms because she has not been so strong for a while. And even the
Yeah.
more experienced players don't have that top level Prism opponent knowledge about knowing what an opponent can do to them, that they might misplay and then get blown out. When the Prism does get that foothold, you can really push and leverage that to take over the game.
Yeah.
So definitely think that's a component of it because she's not been as well represented as time has gone on in this meta, right?
Mhm. Yeah. In fact, just this past weekend, if I remember correctly, there was a significant representation of Prism, which has been a lot higher than over even the last like 6, 7 months. In a typical battle hardened, let alone a calling, you're probably looking at like what, sub 3, 4, maybe 5% maximum of the field, and that's really not much. And then you're gonna look at conversion rates, which have not been very well. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's definitely a hero that not a lot of people have a lot of reps on because of the fact that they're not going to be interacting with them the majority of the time.
Yeah. And I think that what the way I see Prism in this current metagame is she's a powerful deck. She does really strong things, But kind of like Levia slash Levia used to do, or it might still do, sometimes the deck just loses to itself. Sometimes you
Yes.
will just run into those games where you draw the wrong hand at the wrong time and you get weakest linked while you have all no blocks and you're at 10 life and you're like, man, I really needed this turn to go differently with those cards. And that just is what it is, right? At the same time, Prism doesn't have a lot of mechanics that can really deal with a lot of the pings in the game right now. A lot of the value that Prism relies on getting, because she doesn't have armor, she doesn't have like battle worn and temper and all these things to help transition those awkward hands and blend into hands where she can actually play her cards. So when you are on the back foot like that, if someone's throwing a flick knives at you or they're attacking you for one with go again off of like a hunter's clave, you have to say to yourself, man, am I really going to give them an entire card to keep this angel alive? Or am I just going to be happy with my angel stopping one damage? Right. And
Yeah.
because Prism starts on that 8 lower life and no armor, you really need those angels to give you that full value because our aggression, our offensive output's really not that high when you think about
Mhm.
it. Sometimes it can get up there, but when you get a double red herald turn, like double red war tune off a yellow pitch, that's like our best turn. That's a 3 card 14, which is good. But Aurora's doing, 3 card 12s the entire game, plus also
Yeah.
doing other stuff and weaving it in there. So Prism definitely does need to get a little bit better positioned, I think, to really be a top meta contender. I think she's definitely good, like rogue deck or higher tier deck, but for at least where I'm standing, Prism is exploitable. You can learn what she's able to do, and if you play around those blowouts, she's a lot less threatening on a macro tournament scale. So I'm hopeful and eager that she has a little bit more tools maybe coming soon. I don't know anything about the high tides or high seas personally, but we haven't had an illusionist in a while. So
Pirate
maybe,
illusionist. Just saying.
I'm just saying, maybe dark pirate illusionist ghosts could be cool.
That would be
Um,
cool.
so speaking of CC, before we go into hope and well wishes and wish list items, because we could go about that forever. What are some of your favorite pet cards in CC? Because basically, for those who aren't aware, Prism doesn't get a lot of cards, or she hasn't gotten a lot of cards
Yeah.
since she came out. She got Monarch, a little bit Neverfest, and then nothing for a long time because she was LL'd and illegal to play. And then when they brought her back in Dusk Till Dawn, she got a whole bunch of nothing. She got reprints of all her heralds. She got a bunch of common instants that were most of which are unplayable, and she got the angels, which you were forced to play because that was her entire hero ability. And so
Yeah.
you didn't get a ton of deck building variety with Prism. You don't have a lot of these
Yeah.
varying builds and approaches with Prism on a macro scale. It's not like, ooh, this is my Angel's Glow Prism versus my Celestial Fury Prism. This isn't my, if you think about Florian, right? Florian has the sword-based builds with maybe like Nebula Blade or Reaping Blade, or he might have a full Scepter of Pain build. There are options there. But with Prism, it's all right. So you're going to run the good heralds. You're going to
Yeah.
run Angel's Glow. You're going to run effectively 95% the same list as each other. And so a lot of us in the Prism world have been having to agonize over the tiniest little tweaks of
Yeah.
ratios and everything. So what have been your pet cards of choice?
Sure. So anybody that has interacted with me knows that I sing the absolute praises of the exact card that is sitting behind both of our faces right now. Great Library of Solana is hands down my favorite card in the game. I run it an obscene amount of times when I probably shouldn't, and it is just a card that is just, for lack of a better term, pure greed in my eyes. It is one of my favorite cards because, again, harkening back to the whole card advantage aspect, um, 5 card hand plus an arsenal just is the chef's kiss of this game as far as I'm concerned. I absolutely love this card to an unhealthy amount. Just the fact that we're the hero that is playing what probably around 60-70% yellow pitch cards. So why in the world would you not just shoehorn this one card in? I know there's, negatives against it. What if you draw it at the wrong time? You have to, go attack, possibly a herald or angel attack, and then end your turn instead of why wouldn't you just send a herald? Because it's snowballing value. Uh, Kevin Murphy did a statistical calculation and made a software that actually simulated. I think the last one I got from him was 500,000 games for a Prism deck. Number one, seeing great library. Number two, you having around for longer than a turn and not dying, and just the statistical advantage it gave you that is quite literally a snowball effect. As long, basically, to summarize it, if you don't die the turn after you play it, it is a positive outcome for you.
Yeah, and I think library has definitely been one of those cards that people were a bit slower to really embrace because Prism back in the day used to be able to run library. And there were some matchups where you could do it, but the matchups back then were like Chain, pre-errata Briar. So it's these hyper aggro decks that you really did not get time to set up into, or they were the ultimate slowest Oldhim fatigue, pistol dash type of heroes where
I
Prism
don't miss that
generally
one.
no, but Prism was extremely good about being an anti-fatigue deck. You could
Mhm.
basically never fatigue her. She would make an army of spectral shields. There wasn't as much aura hate in the game then as there is now. And if you had your old Luminaris, which turned all of your spectral shields into Kadachis, it was just a matter of time before you grinded your opponent into dust with them, like a chainsaw.
Yeah,
So Prism never had to really worry about these long drawn out games where the library gave you that snowballing value because she just did that automatically naturally. And so
yeah.
when Prism 2, Prism Advent of Thrones, Prism Awakener of Soul came along, you really start to see that benefit of the library because now you're limited on your action points. You only really get 3 attacks per turn max. You basically have you're forced to run a lot of yellows because the Luminar's Angel's Glow is efficient with getting go again on specific hands, right? Like Erudition, Herald of Erudition, extremely important to be able to play off of a single yellow pitch and not have to react with the Celestial Fury to give it go again, things like that. As well as the Figments being able to pay for your go again. It's incredibly huge because we have to run them. We have to run those Figments. And when you don't have the ability to get go again off of the paying 2 for a Herald, paying 2 off of Celestial Fury, and then paying 2 for a second Herald. That's 2 blues. And if you have a Figment as one of those, without a War Tune Herald, you're not going to get to play 2 Heralds that turn or swing other stuff. It just really adds up. And so you're right. Library is an extremely powerful card. And because it wasn't so used in the past, I think a lot of people who played Prism in the past didn't necessarily feel inclined to buy one. I know I didn't. I waited a long time to buy mine. And so it is definitely a card that wins you games. Like at the Battle Hardened last weekend, I think every game I won, I played Library. And every game that I lost, I didn't play Library. So it's funny how that works. So
Yeah, so that is hands down my favorite card in the game. Arclight Sentinel, Genesis, Herald of Erudition, and just straight up Figment of Erudition / Soraya. I'm a hardcore Prism gamer. Absolutely love the abuse that this deck can just fall into, stumble into, for lack of a better term. Um, those situations. Some of them have been streamed in my matches where it's just the you activate that Halo and you draw the one Figment that you were aiming for, and you have to just adapt on the fly and say, well, here we are. Or you draw one of your Figments right off of a Ponder that you just brought into play with Figment of Erudition. You say, well, I'm going to IP myself. just,
every
just
time.
accept it, sigh, and move forward. Like, statistically, this should not happen as often as it seems to.
It's just when it does happen, it's that maybe it's the availability bias. I don't remember which one it is. If you know, write it in the comments. But there's that type of bias where you're like every time it's negative, you feel it so much more. You're like, no, why did this happen? I needed it. You know. Otherwise, you're like, it's fine. I don't care. And you just don't remember it. But
It's like in poker. You remember all your losses, but you can barely remember your wins.
that's right. It's exactly it. Because I know for me personally, my pet card for Prism these days has been Prismatic Leyline. I can't tell you how many people at the Battle Hardened were like, Prismatic Leyline? What does that do? Or that's certainly a choice. And then I'd, beat them with it because, hey, turns out your yellow 3 block card that makes all your heralds 8 power, pretty good.
I have to
Um,
apologize because I'm pretty sure you just quoted me because we had this conversation a little over a week ago.
that's all right. It's funny because it's a card that I look at and I just see with when you're running 9 Triumph, 9 Protection, 9 War Tune, you're gonna get to hit it for its value. And there
Yeah.
are so many cards that don't block in Prism and it's a yellow. It does everything you want it to do. The only thing that could make it any better is just making it a reaction, and then you'd be just
Mhm.
off to the races.
Well, that'd
But
be insane.
yeah, wouldn't
Being able
it? Yeah,
to go over their blocks at instant speed, set up your next 2 attacks. Oh my goodness.
like a Blade Flurry, right?
Please,
It'd be so good.
please, Gottlieb, please.
LSS, please. But they know what they're doing. I remember I got to talk with Brian Gottlieb a little bit when Dusk Till Dawn came out. We didn't actually get to line up an interview. It was a little hectic at the time, but LSS knew that Prism was going to be just fine with her card pool. They were very careful to not make her new cards too good, and they definitely were a little aggressive on some of those balancing decisions early on. But I think where Prism's now is totally fine. If she were able to block with her wraths and block with her figments and things, I think she'd be kind of really good.
Yeah, I also do remember the original comments that Brian Gottlieb would, kind of float out in the Twitterverse, where he's just like, "No, Prism's very good. You guys just haven't figured it out yet. Trust me, she's very good. She's very good." People started winning and kind of blowing up with the original tone build, and he'd just be like, "Told you."
Yeah, I think I'm not going to rehash that entire saga, but Lunar's Angel's Glow was what Prism needed to hit that competitive echelon once again. She definitely came out in a very precarious state, and I think that was for the best. They just LL'd Prism. She's gone for an entire year. They bring her back. They're like, okay, no, we can't have her LL again so soon. We can't have it another Starvo. And so I think they probably had to worry about that just a bit too.
Sure. And you also
Uh,
had, and you bring up another good point is that people remember the original Prism, and the original Prism did give a lot of people extremely negative play experiences. So you kind of have, that memory still in people's minds. And so when the current iteration of Prism came out with Angel's Glow, and then it was kind of, putting them in these ALS loops, it was kind of harkening back to the player's previous experiences with Prism. And so it was just kind of like a, for lack of a better term, toxic play experience,
yeah, and I
which
don't
now
think
I
any
feel is
Prism
kind of
player,
toned down with the ban of Tome of Divinity.
and I don't think a single Prism player out there could honestly say they don't enjoy a little bit of how toxic Prism can be. It's definitely part of that secret spice that we just go,
Feel of the power and the control.
yeah. It's kind of like you're wrestling with this power to just channel it because it's sometimes it is so powerful and you have to have that mastery, but also sometimes you're just like you get burned as well. So as
It's like
far
I
as
know what we signed up for. I know what I'm doing. I'm sorry you're on the receiving end.
we're here to play some card games.
Yeah.
As far as so we've got to talk about a lot of things. We got to talk about Prism's place in the meta game, why we love Prism so much, why Prism sometimes gives us a really hard time, and then also how we really enjoy that deeper mechanical aspect of Prism. And so for the future, looking forward, we know Monarch 3 will come one day. We don't know when that is. It could be this year. Probably isn't. It could be next year. It might be. It could be way far in the future. We hope it's sooner than that. Prism needs more
I hope it's
cards,
sooner.
Ella says. Prism needs
Yes.
more light illusionist cards, or illusionist, I think personally, just needs more cards. They have some of the fewest actual just untalented class cards as a proportion of their pool. That being said, let's just imagine we're in the world where the next set, the pirate set, has illusionist in it. What would you want out of the next set of illusionist cards? What do you want as far as mechanics? Maybe things that could be improved upon, maybe new ground they could break, or maybe it's just making what already exists more cohesive or branching off? What are you hoping for?
Sure. So with what we've seen so far with the war cries, both of Themis and Bellona, um, that leads me to believe that this might be the beginning of an expansion cycle. Whereas every single one of the angels are going to get a war cry to some effect. Um, I really hope that actually does play out because, oh my goodness, I can't wait to see what Warcry of Soraya looks like. Warcry of Aegis would be incredible. I can only just imagine and guess what those could potentially be like, but I really hope that is something that they kind of like sprinkle in a little bit at a time because, again, like you said, Prism has been kind of not getting the individual card support the way that the other classes have. Um, we have been kind of stuck, as you said, with basically the same heralds for quite some time. So maybe an additional herald of some kind would be phenomenal. An equipment piece that could possibly even replace Halo or even a slightly better arm piece. I mean, we're pretty fortunate to get Calming Gesture. I really love what that card gave to us. We didn't necessarily need to just sit with, Null Rune Gloves when we needed, at least AB1. We had one that was just a Spectral Shield on a stick as well. And there's plenty of games nowadays where we always wanted like Wave of Reality, but now it's Wave of Reality alongside AB1 Null Rune Gloves. We have them combined, and it is just amazing. It's also a flick knife savior at times when you're running it against the ninjas. So, with what we got so far, we're pretty fortunate. I would love to see some different headpiece, to be honest with you. I don't think Footsteps is ever going to be topped in our repertoire. It's way too valuable given our strategy because our weakness is everything's illusionist. A six power is naturally going to stop that attack from, and just blow it up. So we need to regain our action point. So that's going to be far more valuable. I don't see us needing or wanting another set of boots. Um, a headpiece, it can be argued that Halo is as powerful as a couple of the cards I'm about to mention, but Scowling Fleshbag and Face Purgatory. Three block cards, so to speak, that will interact with your opponent's hand. I think those are extremely powerful. Fleshbag, I don't want to say unnecessarily. I just think it's not something that the class needed, but it goes over what logical interaction should be for that game. You already have a class that has numerous amounts of armor, huge fridges. Prism does not. This new iteration of Prism, their quote unquote life buffer is because of the Angel's Ward. They've been printing so many ways. Jagged Edge. I mean, Chorus of Iron Song already existed. Murkmire. All of these things, the new Guardian card that was spoiled, that will, if it does four more damage, the damage cannot be prevented. These wipeout effects, I feel like they were almost primarily meant to solve an Enigma problem, and we got maybe splash damage because of that. I'm not entirely certain, but those cards now exist in the format as a whole and are not going to be going away. So therefore, do we need more armor, natural armor that we can adjust with? Is this something where we possibly need more ways that we can have less no blocks in the deck to account for that, for the powerful things that we still do that, arguably other classes are doing without the downsides and the drawbacks? Um, I don't know. I really don't know what the answer to that is. I love the fact that we got, Warcry of Themis. I think that the kind of hint that this is a card as an answer to a future problem scares me a little bit, which leads me to believe that perhaps the second iteration of Shane might be coming, and the banish effects are possibly on the horizon with the aforementioned, return to Monarch. I don't know. I would love to just see more heralds, more ways to potentially stop phantasm effects. Um, there was I don't know if you were a part of this conversation in the Purple Prism Discord at the time, but a couple of us were just kind of like throwing out just obscenely designed cards that we would want, made that we think would be, balanced by logical state in the current metagame. And I came up with one that I feel is balanced, but it drew quite a bit of backlash. And it was just a yellow 2 cost Herald, 6 power, same Herald's shenanigans of, on hit it goes to soul and everything like that. But the effect is it maintains Phantasm. However, while this is on the combat chain, for the rest of your turn, all of your Phantasm or all of your Heralds lose Phantasm. So the downside is, do they let it hit automatically and now Phantasm is back on for your other Heralds? Or do they naturally block it and your follow-up Herald does not have Phantasm? I think given the cards that are out there in the card pool right now, I would feel that would be justifiably powerful, but also balanced by comparison.
Yeah, I really like the idea of that card. I think one of my recurring criticisms of the illusionist class design for a long time now has been the mechanic of Phantasm. I think that Phantasm is a really feels bad mechanic on both sides of the table because on the Prism side, oh no, I played 2 cards, I pitched a card and I played a card, and you just outright ended it. And if I didn't have the legendary foot piece to get my action point back by paying a resource, which is half of a card in my deck, because most of my pitch is yellow, my turn is over and I get no damage. Whereas there's no other class in the game where you get 2 for 1 to as hard and as often as you do as a Prism with Phantasm. Even Dromai wasn't that
Yeah.
bad because she could have board state and things like that and save up for attacks. Where Prism, you don't have that flexibility with your Heralds. At the same time, Phantasm was explored in Everfest to give downsides to popping the cards. Look at Mirage Metamorph. Look at Coalescence Mirage. Look at Phantasmal
Mm-hmm.
Haze. These cards were not necessarily all equal in their on-pop abilities, but they did try to experiment by giving cards a disincentive to your opponent, saying, hey, you might just say, LOL, Phantasm, throw my CNC down. LOL, Phantasm, throw my weakest link, throw my whatever 6 power, whatever it is, throw my max velocity. No way you're getting out of this one, Chief.
Yeah.
And because that feels bad on both sides, right? The Prism's attack is destroyed, and the opponent just turns off their brain and says, yep, kill their card. It's the right choice every time, unless I'm about to kill them. So, it's just not very interesting on a strategic level. And so I love any ideas we have to make Phantasm more engaging, more thought provoking for both sides of the table. However, I don't think we're going to get new Heralds anytime soon unless they have like extra suffixes, because in the lore, there's only 8 Heralds, and we already have all 8 Heralds. So unless they start getting retrains, where they're kind of expanding upon their existing identities, like protection with Aegis making spectral shields or Ravages doing arcane damage. I think it's Sekhem, right? There's so many of these angels and heralds and identities wrapped up in the lore there that we're likely not going to get heralds per se. But I would love to get better light cards, maybe not even light illusionist cards, but light cards that don't suck. That would be awesome.
Yeah.
There's so
I
many
got
good
one
light
for you.
cards. Okay, go for it.
What about a demi hero?
Ah, be still my heart. What
Yep.
would this demi hero do?
Oh, I have no idea how I could even possibly begin to make this, logical or not just obscenely busted. But I mean, given the fact that, Levi has what, 2 options, right?
Yep.
Redeemed and yeah. Um, and then you look at like Teklovasan, Macropotent. I mean, it would make sense for me because she's so Prism is so light and the lore is angelic and godly based. Maybe she transcends into the final boss, so to speak. A little wrestling reference there, but like maybe she transcends into an angel or an archangel of some kind. and that is some kind of a demi hero. I think that would be a phenomenal ability. Magic had planeswalkers. That's kind of what these demi heroes, seem like to me. Something like that would be phenomenal. Making a spectral shield on a whim. Um, you know, Luminalance, right? We wanted to make that card good, but it was just so soul hungry. Um, maybe there's a world where one of her abilities is removing, something from your soul in order to have kind of a power up, a go again, a loose phantasm ability. The world can be my oyster. I can go on for a long time out of what I could make into this hero, but I think that logically and lore based, I think it would be phenomenal for something like that to happen.
Yeah, I really do like the idea of Prism. Maybe you have to have like 8 soul or something crazy, and then you're able to like transform into your demi hero, and then all of a sudden it's like, boom, like you can flip angels without paying soul. You can like when they would die, the figment stays on the field. And you can flip it back again later, like something where you're really
Yeah,
just going into that, like you're saying, transcendent angelic, like biblically accurate prism, right? Where
yeah.
it hardly even resembles her at that point. It's like this locus
I mean,
of
getting back to
holy
figments.
magic,
Ooh, you're speaking my
Yeah,
language.
something like that. I really do think that Prism has a ton of mechanical potential to be made even more interesting over time as they lean into it. But I do think that LSS, at least in the early years of Fab, because we are still in the early years, are trying
Hmm.
to keep things as a firm foundation, and they're starting to like perturb that. We got the angels, we got the figments, we've got demi heroes now. Like they are starting to explore the deeper mechanics that are possible within the game, but
Yeah.
we're definitely still growing into that. I do want to say one card that keeps coming up in my mind that I really hope that is on the pipeline. Please, LSS, please give us something. It's to interact with Phantasm. Prism has had a very bad hand slot for a long time. And normally, when we have a hand slot equipment, it's things like your flick knives, it's things like your Van Brace of Determination, it's things like or it's armor, right? Like your uh, Titan's Fist, whatever. No, it's the Guardian Hands,
Right.
whatever it is. Crater Fist. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so there's all these different ways you can go about it. And what I was really hoping for before, and hopefully maybe we still get, is a illusionist handpiece that just says pay 2 resources, uh, target
This loses
attack,
Phantom.
target attack receives -1 power.
I could be on board
So
with this.
So it's not Blank's Phantasm. You can still
Yeah.
pop Phantasm. You can still throw something with a 7 power, things like that. But it could be Light Illusionist, whatever it is. But the thing is that Prism needs more threats to say, hey, I've got an extra card in my hand. You can't just freely pop me with impunity. You have to either commit more in deck building to actually have 7 powers. You have to hold your 6 powers so that I'm out of resources and I can't threaten this effect anymore. Or you have to block with 2 poppers. Because
Yeah.
if it's a once per turn effect and I'm -1ing on one of your poppers, if you throw 2 6s on there, I'm getting popped no matter what. And I can't
Yeah.
stop it unless I do like a Figment of Triumph play. But now there's interplay. Now there's back and forth. Now there's layers of decision making instead of just LOL, here's my 6. I don't care what you do. So I would love a
Mm.
repeatable, non-destroying itself. It can have the same text as Rapture where you pay 1 to give it ward 1. And then it's just like, hey, I have a
Yeah, so
resource
we don't
sink
have to shove reprimands into our deck.
or blue reprimands, right? Like there still could be
Yeah.
worlds where you want to use it for that because maybe you can, since it only can do it one time, you need to stack the effects. A yellow reprimand may still see some use, but even being able to stop your opponent's damage by saying, hey, like I'm pitching a blue card, I'm going to use my footsteps to stop a breakpoint, and I'm going to throw my -1 on your attack to also stop another breakpoint. It gives you some more defensive utility as well because it's not just on attacking cards like reprimand does. It's more like a blinding beam on your blue blinding beam on a stick, right? Which would be phenomenal. It could be a light equipment for all I care. It would just give you much more play into Phantasm and make it much more interesting, I hope, for both sides. So that's what I'm hoping for. We're not going to get it. I guarantee you that. LSS should not let me design
Yeah.
cards. I make the most busted stuff you've ever seen. So I do think that would be fair though, and I would love playing it. So, do you have anything else you want to say before we
Yeah, I
wrap
would
up?
absolutely. No, thank you so much for having me. I've greatly enjoyed talking about this. As a fellow illusionist and Prism gamer, pleasure to be with you and have these conversations. And to everybody watching, just if anybody's actually trying to get into Prism, get the reps in, learn the lines, have fun, just have fun. Find out which kind of play lines you really enjoy, and just get reps against all of the other heroes in the field out there.
I agree. I can't say it better myself. Remember, when we go to these tournaments, like I did at the Battle Hardened the other weekend, we're not going to win. We're going to play Prism because then no matter what happens, you've got what you came for. So hope that y'all learn how to play Prism a bit better. Keep your eyes on the channel for more Prism content like gameplay, deck techs, as well as tips and tricks. And keep your eyes on the public Discord because I know myself and Franz are both extremely active there. You can find people like Prez as well, and whole bunches of other people that are happy to lend a helping hand to help you understand how to play the game better. So make sure you're on the lookout for that. Well, we'll leave the description, a link in the description below to get to that Discord server. So thank you all for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. Peace.
Been a pleasure. Thank you.